Welcome. I'm happy to be presenting what's new in Revit 2024. I think we should just get started. There's a lot of new features, obviously, in this release. These are my favorite, the ones that are highlighted in bold. So we're going to be talking about design productivity, simulation and analysis, cloud and data interoperability, as well as design optimization and documentation efficiency. So let's get started. Speaking of get started, when we first get on the Revit homepage, you'll see a new feature, My Insights tab. Basically, personalizing insights, based on the commands that you've been using frequently. Basically, it helps you quantify the most common commands that you use, and then offer suggestions that are similar to or related to those features. Provides information, hints, tips and tricks, things like that. One of my favorites is the dark theme. Basically, when you turn on dark theme, it actually might even come on automatically based on your Windows configuration. If Windows is configured, like Windows 11 configured to dark theme, then it's automatically going to be in dark theme. But you can always go there and manipulate the settings within the Revit home settings. Essentially, over 2,000 new icons based on the need to make them appear just as efficiently in the dark or the regular light theme. So basically, things of the project browser, the palette, the option bar, the view control bar are all optimized and configured. If you went into the window panel, the view window panel, you can also go and see the theme. Oh, I went the wrong way. What else is new in 2024 is a bunch of new sample models and project templates. This has given us the capability of exploring MEP, structure, site, civil, architecture. And as the previous sample files also had these navigation tools to assist with learning about the project and learning about features related to the areas focused. So for instance, you'll see different question marks throughout the sheets in the sample files. But basically, you're also going to have the capability of understanding how different disciplines put their work together, because what we're basically getting in these sample models and project templates are good practices. There's never the best practices, but I'm always a proponent of learning about the good practices. So take a look at the project, explore the other files. In addition to new files, there is a template, an all discipline template, which is interesting, giving us the capability of looking through a project with many disciplines and looking at the different themes and disciplines that control the views that you see within these projects. Speaking of optimization, new features being able to search through the project browser. So whether I put plan or whether I put level, you'll see that it immediately starts to filter and highlight the elements that you're searching, or the characters that you're searching within the project browser. So it gives us the easier abilities to search through projects and views. Personally, I like to go through the sheets and look at the views that are part of the sheets, but it's nice to be able to search through the project browser and look through using keywords and whatnot. Color books are also new. And although you can search through and find various Pantone books and RAL classic books, you can also use the color book tool to customize and make your own color book. So we're going to be able to export and save a custom .acb file, Autodesk color books. Speaking of optimizing colors and looking at the views more optimally, there's a new display feature called textures. Textures is basically a combination of realistic and shaded views. So it basically gives that opportunity to see the colors in a consistent manner without having the light affect the colors that you're seeing. But we're also seeing textures as well as shadows in those views. So I think it's a great little tool to control the views that you're seeing within your model. Optimizations that were released in 2023.1 is a Revit to Twinmotion enhancement, automatic synchronization. So we're basically saving the changes and synchronizing the changes between a selected Revit model view and Twinmotion. So if you enable it, which is only possible in a 3D view, you're going to be able to synchronize the information that you see in your Twinmotion setup. So if you haven't seen Twinmotion already, it's definitely worth an exploration. With a free account set up with Twinmotion, you're going to be able to download all kinds of great assets, everything from flags to fire to furniture. Now for the big item, TopoSolids. So basically, no more topo surfaces. We're dealing with TopoSolids. So there's no more topo surface commands. You literally have no ability to create surfaces moving forward. They all become solids. And if you had opened up a project and upgraded a project that had a surface, you will be able to modify those. So basically, solids are fantastic, and you'll see there's a number of features that I'm going to discuss in a few slides that follow. Basically, we can convert a surface to a solid and move those over, and we can create all the necessary elements to build up your site context. So when you're dealing with TopoSolids, you get a nice layered structure and instance and type parameters within these elements. They're room bounding, which is phenomenal. And most importantly is our ability to host elements on them. So let's go a little further in the next slide. You can make solid subdivisions as long as they're, greater than 0. But basically, those subdivisions are going to help you make roads and parking lots and curbs and subdivisions. One of the things that are really great is to be able to create underground spaces, right? So we can create tunnels, we can create usable spaces underneath our topo surfaces. We had workarounds in the past, but these are so much easier to work with. One of the things that you'll see when you start working with these TopoSolids is our ability to cut and subtract. So let me jump over and show you what I have. So here's the site model that I've worked with this project. This again comes with the samples that you will have preloaded when you install 2024. So let's take a look. There are the subdivisions. There are the voids, and I created an initial void over here. This is there's no more pads. So in order to cut a surface, cut a solid, TopoSolid, you'll create a mass. And this is a solid mass, as you can see here in my mass properties. I grab the mass, I edit in place, and you could see that this element that I created is a solid. Okay, so cancel the mass. The solid is within the TopoSolid that I have in this site, and I'm going to subtract this out of the topo. So I'm going to use a typical cut tool, right? So I grab cut, and as you see from the status bar, the TopoSolid is the host that is to be cut, and this solid that I created is going to do the cutting. And there it is, a little processing, and there's the cut as a result. That's what happened over here. So over here, there was also a mass created in order to cut this roadway. But I wanted to show you over here, you'll see that one wall, this is a foundation, 24-inch concrete basic wall. It has already been cut, so it is subtracting away from the topography. And this one has not. So I'm going to use it just a regular cut command, just like I showed you before. That's the object to be cut, and that's the object that I'm going to be doing the cutting. So it's just a basic wall. There it goes. So foundations, footings, they're all going to subtract away from the TopoSolid moving forward. I think it's pretty cool. It's a little odd, right? So here's another one that I created where it's a solid mass that subtracts into the water. I'm making some sort of funnel. Interesting, right? All right. Back to the tools. Now that we have solids, we also have a greater ability to do cut and fill schedules. So using something like the graded region, I'll be able to carve away an existing site and get a a new subtraction and do a schedule for that. That's pretty good. It's a lot easier than in the previous surface actions. Did I mention that when you're creating a topo, when you have a topo surface and you turn it into a TopoSolid, you'll have both. So we delete the topo surface and we end up with a TopoSolid as a result. Some other optimizations that we've seen in the previous release were these control points, the ability to control the visibility of these control points. So even in the topography now, I can turn off and turn on the preview of those points for shape editing. It saves up a lot of memory not having to generate these points. So typically we're going to turn them off. And as I mentioned in the past, these topographies, these TopoSolids, have a greater ability of hosting elements now. So you can see from this fantastic image that I think the landscaping and the civil engineers are going to find a lot of cool flexibility within TopoSolids in this release. One of the things that can be hosted are site components, parking, railing, and really basically any floor-based element can be hosted on a surface on a TopoSolid now. You see, it's going to take me a little while to get used to this functionality or the terminology of topography being solid, but I've been playing with it quite a bit, and it's pretty cool. So in addition to these other things, right, and have a layered, structured topography, we're also going to be able to use a slab edge tool to create curbs and whatnot. So I think that's a pretty interesting ability, obviously for sidewalks and for curbs and for roadways, but also for things like, walls to hold back the site. Going off on a different topic, data exchange has been upgraded for Revit 2024. Take a look at this link, apps.autodesk.com, and I'll bring over the data exchange page. So when you go to that page, you're going to learn all about data exchange. Basically, that's Autodesk's tool built for interoperability between applications. Rhinoceros being one of them. Also using the Autodesk Construction Cloud for this data exchange is a big improvement. Talking about some structural enhancements, rebar and the ability to do path alignment options on rebar is pretty amazing. So I'm trying to convince my structural engineers, of which I just finished a structure class, to take a look at some of these new features. The ability to get really good quality quantification and weight on all of the rebar in the project is going to be a game changer, but it takes a while to learn these features. But in 2024, these features are a lot easier to use. So, freeform rebar placement or automated rebar placement based on the object, right? So we're building concrete forms, and we're easily able to build either parallel with or perpendicular to the elements. All kinds of things related to stirrup orientation. So again, automatic capability of placing these rebars and placing them accurately, and using tools like spacebar to really flip them around and get them at the proper orientation. Now, just keep in mind that when you're doing rebar, you can control the visibility of these elements globally. So only show them in one view or obviously in the schedule. There's some new tools related to fabrication, things to make the ductwork more realistic and give us better quantities and accurate schedules on these elements. Things like the duct stiffeners. Speaking of more information, right? This building information model is becoming central for every discipline. Being able to use these new elevation parameters is giving the engineers a lot more flexibility on how they want to document and control these elements. So you don't have to use all of them, but you can use some of them. So you could see that there are quite a bit of enhancements in order for tagging and locating elevation of these systems. There's always been an issue with thickness of pipe and thickness of insulation. So in these features, you see that we're going to be able to get this information in tags and schedules and even be able to control them in view filters. So now there's going to be more capability of visualizing insulation. So duct fittings, accessories, pipe fittings, and their accessories. Bottom line, improve efficiency when hiding ducts with insulation, or controlling ducts with insulation. Speaking of controlling and getting the right information across, when we generated a scope box, there was a default height, and it was just kind of like either the previous value we used, or you would always have to go into a 3D view or an elevation to modify the scope box after the fact. Now, being able to get the height and name parameters right there in the properties palette upon creation is a big deal, and one of those features that everybody has asked for. And finally, more flexibility when dealing with these scope boxes. Speaking of more flexibility, project parameters were previously sorted at date time creation. Now they can be sorted alphabetically in type and instance property dialog box. So these are really nerdy things that the Revit geeks really love to see. Speaking about Revit geeks, when you're dealing with family parameters, you have the ability to export, helping the create type catalogs with less effort. Because in the family, you would go there and generate new types. Now we're going to be able to control those types and generate a text file when when working directly in the families. So pretty good stuff. Talk about good stuff. Simulation, the access sun settings for solar study. It's right there in the ribbon now. Get higher precision and can kind of control the second intervals for shadows. I'm not sure if we really need to synchronize or scrutinize to that level, but all right, 15, 30, 45, or 60-second intervals. We can also edit these in a perspective view, which is nice. So when you're in a camera view is really where we want to see the shadows. So improvements made on sun settings. Talk about improvements related to the sun and analysis. When we do our analysis, within Revit, we generate an energy model, and it's time consuming depending on the size of the model. So now we have capabilities that allow us to do energy analysis based on a cropped view of our model. So we're going to be able to crop the model and then export and create an energy model based on that cropped section. It's applicable to 3D views. So you take a 3D view, minimize that 3D view, and do an analysis on that section. Speaking of enhancements related to analysis, enhanced structural analytical loads. So for those engineers doing the structural modeling, obviously when we're doing structural modeling, we're also doing analytical modeling. So now we have the capability of more enhanced analytical loads, and it's a lot easier to build these area loads in a centralized location, or to be able to break them up into kind of sketched areas. So you can see a polygonal section, a rectangular section. Bottom line, more versatile and accurate definition of loads. The color coding is interesting for the engineers to visualize this information. So based on the loads that you're applying, your analytical model, you can use this functionality to document. So create views that visualize how these loads are being applied at the various levels. Now, when we're doing loads, obviously we would have to work with the analytical model. So those analytical model is sometimes different than the physical structural model. And what we're seeing here is better functionality to go ahead and modify the analytical properties of the members. And once we do that, we can copy these from element to element so that we could simplify the association between analytical and model. Some of the automation rules have been enhanced so that we can easily identify and track the connections that were being made. So as we do them, we go ahead and we can track them, and basically it assists us in placing more analytical connections to similar elements. So you can repeat the analytical that you've done on first and apply it to the second. Now, for the structural engineers who are using the model correctly, we basically have enhanced features to figure out the fluid dynamics that are going on within the models. So when you go ahead and modify these settings, you're specifying the fluid and temperature for each fabrication surface. Basically, fluid to air will apply the density and dynamic viscosity from the duct settings. Pretty amazing that we can do that kind of stuff, and we're getting more features to assist us in doing that. Speaking of that, when we want to visualize the CFM that's being generated based on the way that the ductwork was modeled, as you see in the diagram below, you can set a color fill legend based on the friction that's happening within the individual components. Well, bottom line, more integrated design and fabrication workflows for mechanical engineers. Not to leave out the electrical engineers. So demand factors are now applied to the analytical loads. That basically gives us the capabilities for electrical analysis, supports electrical engineers looking to reduce overall design time and quality within the model. When you're looking at electrical load capabilities, they were first introduced in 2023. Engineers can now manage load sets for non-coincidence backup equipment loads. Now, I don't even know anything about electrical load and how to deal with those equipment, but this basically gives us new capabilities for analysis, supporting engineers looking to reduce overall design time, right? So that the cloud is where Autodesk is investing a lot of effort. We're going to be able to bring in our coordination models into Autodesk Docs. So a coordination model is generated from Navisworks, for instance. We can go ahead and take a coordination model, place it in Autodesk Docs, and contribute to it within Navisworks, and then also reference those coordination models into Revit. And I'm kind of curious. We had a few discussions in the Revit user group presentation that I did on what's new. Different coordination models from Navisworks can be made in different versions of Revit. Why not go and link it into the current version? So I believe we can link in various versions. Anyway, once you're in Docs, 60 plus formats, we can also bring those into our projects. So basically, when you're dealing with coordination models, which Autodesk has put in a lot of effort on, we can bring in and get better use of those models, no matter how complex or however they may be. Bringing them into Revit as a coordination model gives us a lot of advantages. So now that we're using these coordination models more and more often, we can tab in and find properties within those objects that are within the coordination model. So if you're not familiar with Navisworks, it simplifies and optimizes the model. So when we're in Revit, we can tab into those coordination models and extract properties. We also have point snaps. So these coordination models are not just sitting in the background as an underlay. We can align and snap dimensions to them. So LM is a new shortcut within the snap dialog box, allowing us to, corners and ends of coordination objects. I think we're going to see a lot more use of these coordination models. So as a result, in the Manage Links dialog box, new coordination model tab. So we're going to be able to quantify how many coordination models we have, what the status of them, are they in the cloud, or are they referenced in the, our local files, the size of them, hopefully as well. Basically, easily manage coordination models for faster coordination within the team. Whoa, I stepped forward a little too much. So I think we're done with coordination models, right? So that's the Manage Links dialog box. Now we're talking about collaboration cache. So when you're using the design collaboration features within the Autodesk Construction Cloud and Revit, you're synchronizing your local model to the cloud, we can control where that model cache is located. So, you know, if something horribly went wrong and you lost connection, maybe your internet went down, you can find your coordination model. You find your cloud collaboration cache. That's your Revit local file. You can find it within the username app data folder, and now we can move it. We're not going to move it to the cloud, but we're going to move it somewhere where we can get easier access to it. I've always had just a shortcut to that location, but you know, now you have access to the cloud model. Control where you want to save local copies when working on Revit Cloud in the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So PDFs in Revit LT. Okay, so you know, it's good to see that Revit LT is getting a little love. So we saw a PDF capability within the previous, 2023 release. Now LT users can manage that as well. Revit will snap to PDF lines if vectors were embedded in the original PDF. There's also some design automation access within the API if you wanted to do some of that. Speaking of structural engineering, robot, right? Autodesk robot structural analysis. When you're doing your analytical model and your loads within Revit structure sections, you can now get those models over to robot in a more optimized fashion. So when you transfer that data, you also have a different approach. Basically prevent the import of structural loads defined outside the host boundary. There's some benefits: simplified transfer, the unified load, improved transfer capabilities for panel properties, which differ in thickness of material, enable the transfer on analytical panels created by extrusion in Revit. So working in robot is going to be easier, bottom line. So some cool design optimization stuff. We love Dynamo. We're up to 2.17 with this release. And as Revit gets its hotfixes and patch releases, Dynamo will get those improvements as well. So with 2024, new node recommendations as you're typing, looking for nodes. The existing object type ranking method continues to be available as an option and has been renamed to node type match. There's a couple other things. The autocomplete settings are available in the preferences and features, node autocomplete. So as you're working with Dynamo, there's some enhancements that I think a lot of people will enjoy. Let me know if you have any other questions. Love to talk about Dynamo and other graphs like Grasshopper and things like that. For those who are not familiar with Dynamo, but want to use some of the features the firm has been using, the firm has been creating, Dynamo Player is here for you. So some improvements on Dynamo Player, including the manager, looking at missing elements and graph dependencies. There's a couple of new sample graphs that are available, random family instance placement and warnings, isolate elements. Bottom line, achieve better design outcomes more efficiently. So this geeks me out. For those people who always want adjustments in the dialog boxes, 20 new dialog boxes now are stretchable. One of the ones that really highlight element ID, you need to stretch those out. I'm not sure about work plane, but labels and things like that are easily stretchable now. So for guys like my buddy Danny, got to have everything stretchable, everything maximized. New enhancements. So we also have SDK documentation available for steel connections. So another feature that helps structural engineers design steel structures more quickly and accurately. Some new samples in the API to assist you in making those connections on an automated level. If you're doing any of the macros, Revit macros, they're off, disabled by default now, for better, for worse. I think for most of us, it's better. But basically, we don't want Revit executing malicious codes, right? So security is good. Some more features based on the API enhancements. So C# is everything. Customers can work on more complex models, access to a class of Revit group, reload and method options, access to the list of element IDs that are not used in the model. It's an interesting kind of a roundabout way of getting information about what's going on in the model. Basically, you can disclose and adjust the draw order of things on 3D families. So there's a lot of new enhancements that I think programmers and developers would love. Speak about documentation, which we all love. There's some cool new features that allow us to drag and drop views. So multiple views can be dragged and dropped onto a sheet, and they will automatically place themselves in what seems to be the correct location. I guess it's better off than placing them on the side, so it places them on the sheet. Nice stuff, and you're also going to be able to access this stuff through the API and automate some of this as well, and it may make it a little bit easier. So when you have a bunch of views on the sheet, you can even swap them out. That was a new feature last year. So we can move them between sheets as well. So the move align to sheet command has expanded, supporting moving the following sheet-based elements. So views and schedules, panel schedules, detail groups, annotation elements, detail elements, revision cloud, and tags, as well as images. The bottom line, move multiple elements between sheets while keeping their original positions. I like this one too, because I can go directly to the sheet, even though I'm working on a view, like a section or an elevation. I can go to the sheet, which makes sure that everything I've done is going to, illustrate themselves properly, and the design intent is kept intact. So I know the changes I made on my view and how they're going to affect the sheet. Open sheet, brand new feature. Being able to schedule revision clouds. As Andre said, finally, right? What took so long? This ability to schedule revision clouds is great. You can use fields from views and sheets and revision clouds to create your schedule. The schedule also contains schedule keys and shared parameters. So track and call out changes to document sets. This is neat. So we talked about textures in a previous slide. We can see textures and consistent colors. Now we can control how those textures are applied across surfaces, as well as the selected face. So basically, note that the shape editing element display non-flat surfaces, the pattern will appear distorted. So if it's flat, your pattern will be aligned. If it's not, then we have to still make some adjustments. When you're doing structural rebar, one of my favorite topics to bring up, now we can bring out and extract out the individual bars with documentation. So basically, the new feature streamlines coordination between designers and fabricators, improving the clarity of the shop drawings in Revit. So if you're not doing the shop drawings in Revit, you can share your model with the shop drawing team, perhaps, or you could get them there a lot quicker by showing some of these new ways of representing rebar and documenting. Speaking of documenting the shapes, when you're in the schedule, there's a variety of ways that you could illustrate those bars and the bending details. So basically, streamlining coordination between the fabricators, just like in the last one. This is kind of wild. In previous versions, the way 2D elements were displayed in the family editor projects and printed on PDFs was inconsistent. As a Bluebeam partner, we've seen combinations of issues getting to PDF. So our draw order controls the 2D elements that are now available in the family editor for family categories. Previously, draw order controls were only available when working with detail annotation or profile families. So bottom line, we're going to get consistent visual appearance across environments with 2024. Resizing schedule rows. Okay, it's not an enormous feature to drop the mic on, but that's the last feature in our presentation.